Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We provide fan-oriented and analytic discussions on a variety of animated shows, movies, and anime, currently featuring Steven Universe, Miraculous Ladybug, and Archer, among others. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Michelle Anderer.
Hello.
Today, Michelle and I will be discussing the 2009 stop-motion film Coraline.
Yay.
The Laika Henry Selick directed film. We will be looking back on it, discussing opinions of the film, everything surrounding the movie. It's our first discussion, I believe, and we'll hopefully do the other two of that.
Few. Yeah.
Very not that many to get into. We talk about animated shows and movies here at the Overly Animated Podcast. You can check us out at overlyanimated.com or search for the Overly Animated Podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. So, Michelle and I both rewatched Coraline very recently too. Mm-hmm. So let's, I guess the way I like starting these retrospectives is, like, when did you first see this film? What did you think of it when you saw it? And, what did you think of it this time? Cause we both recently rewatched it. So why don't you, start us off with that general area?
Well, I first found out about it because I think the first time I read the book was maybe 5 or 6 months before the film was getting released, and I absolutely loved the book. So like I immediately was like going online trying to find information and found out that this movie was getting close to being released. So I saw it in theaters in 3D, which wasn't nearly as terrible an experience as I had anticipated, I think, because like back in 2009, there wasn't like a surge of 3D movies at that point, and the last 3D movie I'd seen in 3D was like Spy Kids 3D, and obviously this movie is much better than that movie, so...
I mean, that's pretty insulting to Spy Kids 3D, I don't know about that.
Oh, you like Spy Kids more? Or you think it's actually good?
That was not a statement that you should take any value from. Continue.
And well, I really liked it. I remember there were a couple parts that in terms of the 3DS, like kind of like all right, like the very beginning when the hands are sewing the doll together and the needle like pokes through the button. In the theater, it was like very, very like, hey, look at this needle, it's really poking out. And the scene where Coraline's in the by the roof and she's talking to Mr. Babinski and he's like stretching out and there's a scene where he like does the splits and his leg just kind of like really pops out. I remember that being like really, really 3D in the movie, but I really liked it. I had my expectations pretty low because I liked the book so much and I was afraid of being disappointed, and I really wasn't disappointed at all. I think they definitely stuck to the book really, really, like to the point where like most of the dialogue was exactly the same and the scenes were very, very similar. So that was a really good experience first time around. And second, this past time I've been rewatching, I think I've been noticing a lot more smaller moments. I have a lot more sympathy for Wybie, I think, now than I did the first time I watched it. Yeah. I feel really bad for Wybie now. Poor guy.
So, but yeah, you're still. So when you say you like it, like, what are we talking here? Like, like this is like a truly great film. This is a good film. What do you think?
I consider it a classic, even though it's not that old.
It does feel like it's older than it is, and it's like classic territory, even though it's like
sure.
6 years old, 7 years old. Yeah.
I know there are a lot of people who think that because this was like his first feature film, and in a lot of ways people are like, oh, well, like, like Coraline was just like the precursor to like Paranorman, like Paranorman's like a way more solid movie. And while I think Paranorman might be overall stronger, I think I like Coraline more, even though it's not, the plot can get a little all over the place, but I think it's kind of like a little gloriously messy in that sense. And it's just it's so beautiful, it just looks so good, and the soundtrack is so good, and the characters are like actual, for stop motion, like they feel like such interesting real like characters with actual personalities, and like the stop motion helps them like express their whole like feelings with their body in a way that I think a lot of animation doesn't do. So no, I think it's not my favorite movie, but it's definitely like I'd say top 20, maybe top 15 favorite animated movies.
Favorite animated movies. There's no designation there for a second. Yeah, I feel like people's perception is, I don't know. I can't speak for all. I feel like people consider this one like kind of like a classic, more type that territory, and then the other two like films I feel like aren't as revered. Although I don't know, it's I could see that, right? Like if you're
A lot of people like Paranorman, I
yeah,
know,
I
but
could
Box Trolls
see.
is kind of more confusing. It's very different tonally, so I think that's part of
Mhm.
it.
So I have not seen either of those yet. Like that's the thing. So I've also not read the Neil Gaiman novel. So although I've read other of his novels, I just never read Coraline for whatever reason. So I saw this movie not in theaters. I didn't even know it was in 3D. That was kind of crazy. Like why is this movie in 3D? But I guess animated
Yeah.
films are generally I think better 3D than live action films, or at least there's the floor is higher than live action films. Like you're never going to see an awful 3D effects in an animated film. Uh,
Hopefully not.
yeah, you'd assume not.
In a big budget like that, you'd hope not.
Well, I don't even know if that's the budget. Sometimes they just tack it on at the end in these big live action.
Yeah, that's how like the 3D, like the last two Harry Potter movies kind of felt. It's like, did this really need to be in 3D? Like what did it add? Like
Yeah,
this movie wasn't centered around that. What where Coraline really was.
and we're starting to die down a little bit from this 3D craze, but
Hmm.
yeah, definitely a lot of films that and I could see Coraline being more of like an inherent 3D film, but I don't know. I feel like I was reading about the production on uh, Wikipedia, and there wasn't a ton that was reliant on 3D. There's a little bit here about how like the way they shot it, I guess. Um,
Yeah, it's actually like the first feature film ever completely shot with 3D stop motion, which is pretty. I don't
well,
even
there's
know what
not
the
that many.
exact
Yeah, I don't know that
yeah
there's not many stop
means,
motion feature films, right? So I don't know if
but
that.
it's really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I guess it makes sense time wise. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I haven't seen it in 3D, so I saw it probably like 2010. I like on demand, right? A
Yeah.
year after it came out. I don't know if I ever saw. I don't think I saw it in theaters, and then I rewatched it now. When I saw it originally, I really liked it. Um, and I don't even remember. I mean, that's long enough
A
ago
long
that
time
I
ago.
can't really
Yeah.
trust my opinions on it. That's and not that my opinions were bad 6 years ago. It's just it's I feel like let's go what I thought now. I rewatched it today, and I still really liked it. I think this is a great film.
Oh, good.
I think that this to me is what I would group as kind of like an experiential film. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like
I would agree with that.
there's I'm much more forgiving of movies plot wise if I like feel something watching them. I don't know.
Yeah, if like they're gonna get lost, but you feel okay with it, I think that that can be a strength of a movie, not a weakness.
Yeah, like to me, I don't know. To me, one of the ultimate ones is like Interstellar. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh yeah, I have.
Like that movie is awful plot wise, especially at the end. But
It kind of
I
is, but
really like it
it's
because it's such
good.
an
Yeah.
experience. Yeah, and I don't think Coraline is awful plot wise. I just think it's like okay plot wise.
Yeah.
But tonally, it's incredible. And
Hmm.
I've I guess maybe Nine is the only thing I've seen somewhat similar tonally. Maybe that's not close, but I'm just trying to think of anything that's elicited similar feelings from me. And I really think that this kind of nails it with like this creepy, but like I don't even know how to describe it. We can get into we can get into that, but it's really good. I feel like this movie doesn't have an expansive script, and it knows that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's important why the details of this secondary world or anything like that. I don't think that it matters. I actually think that there's a lot of parallels to Spirited Away with this film, and both like in plot
Yeah, in terms of
and in
like
like both films are like we have the real world and then we go off into this other world in the conditions of whatever. And then I
in terms of
also
like both the protagonists like maturing being like her
also
big
yeah
story arc too. Yeah, for sure.
young girls like coming of age type stories. And also like I think Spirited Away also does not have the most sensical script. I actually think Spirited Away script is very strong, but I don't think it's like supposed to make sense. And then I think that the big reason both are great films, and I think Spirited Away is a few tiers above this one, but still, this is still very good, is that just they both just feel like you're going on such a journey, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe even compared to any other. Like we could. I feel like these are two of my top like journey films to a certain extent. I think Spirit Away is more of a journey than this. This is more of just like an experience, but that type of thing, you know. So I definitely thought of parallels this time watching it. But yeah, I think this movie is very good, and I don't necessarily think it's because of character or plot reasons, although the characterization is fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's yeah, I don't know. Always liked this film. Always thought this was very good, and like artistically, it's very impressive. I just think that it's doing like we'll definitely get into that, but like that's the big reason why I feel like the film succeeds on a kind of tone and emotional level is just because of how it's able to execute its like set pieces and stuff like that. And yeah, I think it's very successful um and I kind of like I don't know, I haven't seen their other two films, but I hope that I would hope that more animated films try to go towards this route because I feel like this is something kind of unique to animation. Not necessarily, but like just doing things that you can do through whatever animated form you want to take to elicit certain types of things that would be more difficult to do live action. I feel like that's a great
Oh yeah,
thing.
for sure.
So yeah, I really admire this film on that level too. Um, okay, I don't know where do we want to start here when going when going through Coraline. So uh, let's talk about the I don't know. Let's talk about the other world, I guess. When I was thinking of this film, I was like, what do I remember?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it was these kind of just fantastic, like fantastical set pieces types things. Like I definitely remember the garden in the other world. That
Mm-hmm.
definitely stood out in my memory. Maybe like the image of the Mr. Bobinski like going towards the camera, right? Like that type of
Oh yeah, I'm just doing his like flips and stretches.
yeah. So I don't know. I feel like what stands out from the film is are those types of like weird great visuals. What else do you
Mm-hmm.
think is do you like take away from the film as to I mean to a certain extent everything, right? But like especially what stands out.
I think the things, especially the first time around, when I had a much less like critical eye, I think, or maybe just less trained eye, I was always like, how did they like do this? You know, like even things like when Coraline would like shake the snow globe and you see like the snow falling down, it's like that snow is in stop motion, but it looks like it's in a water globe. Like, how did they do that? The scene when she YB's looking for banana slugs and there's like this fog everywhere and it's beautifully like the set is just beautiful. It's just like how do they do stop motion fog, you know, like those are the kind of things I was really taken aback by. Or like when Coraline would be walking like at the beginning when she comes out of the house and you just have that camera like pull up and you see like all these hills and like all these trees and she's just walking through this whole world, like it's so intricate. And I think that's one of the things that the film did so well. It made its world completely believable and realistic, and nobody ever felt flat, you know, which can be really easy to do in animation. So it it was a very cinematic movie. I think that's one of the things you were pointing out to, like that garden scene where like all the flowers are blooming, and you have that great overhead shot when she's flying with her other father on the robotic Priamantis helicopter thing, and you just
Yeah.
like see all the flowers blooming into her face, and it's just like a gorgeous shot, you know, and it's so well done. Very visually stunning. I think that was one of the things I always kind of was just like, how did they make this happen? This is gorgeous. Like, just how kind of feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I don't know. Do you agree with my assessment that like what stands out to you from the film is definitely more uh more visual and or more just I don't know, could you could include like mute sound and stuff too in it rather than the plot or characters, or do you think maybe or would you separate characters from that statement and maybe it's like character plus non-plot, or I don't know, what do you think of that?
I think, well, the characters are like such a huge part of the story. I think for me now at least, the visuals are kind of like the icing on top of the cake. Like they add so much, but the story can't just look beautiful. It has to be a solid story, and it has to have, you know, people were invested in watching and have them grow and change. And I think ultimately, like Coraline herself is such a interesting, like cool character. Like she in a lot of ways she feels very much like a real little girl. She she's kind of like snobby to Wybie, and she knows how to be annoying on purpose to her parents when she feels like they're neglecting her, and she has a very like strong sense of self, and the way even like the way they make her walk, and she kind of like slouches a little or like walks like wobbles kind of back and forth kind of freely. It's very expressive, and I think all the animation does a great service to showing us what her characterization is like before she even says anything, which is really great, and it and a great thing that Laika's been able to do, I think, as a company, continuing on with their other films too.
Yeah, yeah, getting more into the character of Coraline. I feel like she's like the. I mean, we can talk briefly about the other characters, but this is definitely her movie.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think like she's like a realistic characterization. That's like one of the things that most stands out to me.
Yeah.
And I also think it's like notable, notably realistic. I don't know. Her like even like her design is pretty unique, but I feel like it's a subtle characterization. Probably like, it's either subtle or weak. I feel like, but I don't think like I said, I don't really care what this movie is doing too much character plot wise. But that being said, if we were going to evaluate one thing from the two of those that would stand out, I think it would be Coraline's character. Do you think that like so you mentioned her going on uh like a kind of more somewhat of a coming of age type thing. I don't know if I said that or you said that, but what do you think that she like goes on an arc, a character arc in this film, and like if so, like do you think where do you think she ends up? Because I feel like this movie is definitely not necessarily trying to have like huge standout morals,
Yeah, for sure.
which I think is a
Much
good
more
thing
subtle.
with its tone. I think that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, what do you think of Coraline's character arc?
Well, the first time I watched it, I kind of like wasn't sure what the arc was because it was so subtle. And even this time, I really had to kind of think for a second. And I think there's kind of two morals. Like, I think on the most easy to pick out moral is like, don't like if you get everything you want, you don't really want it anymore. Like, there's something to be said for having like the gratification of earning something. And that's shown a lot through how when Coraline goes to the other world, like it seems really perfect, but it's also like all a ruse, and it's pretty substantialist. Whereas she takes a lot of because like part of the thing about the movie that's different from the book is in the book like she only really goes to the other world like once and then tries to escape, and then she finds out that her parents have been taken, and then she has to like go on her quest. But in the movie they stretch it out to like two or three times she visits, and she gets to go home fine and nothing bad happens to her. And I think that was kind of a good choice because one, they have to like stretch out this pretty short story. I think the book was about only 160 pages long. And it feels more believable that she'd like have a good experience and want to go back a couple times than immediately be like, okay, this isn't for me. Um, but the parents are. I know a lot of people seem to take issue with like, especially the mom. She seems like very neglectful and like isn't around for Coraline to like hang out with, and that she's like not a good mom. And I totally disagree with that. And I think part of the other moral is that like people still love you, and they might not always be there like when you want them to. They might not always be accessible, but that doesn't mean that they don't really love you. And that people that might be around like all the time might not always have your best interest at heart, which is definitely true in the case of the other mother, and her reasoning for wanting Coraline around, and the fact that her parents they have moments. And I think part of the issue is like a big part of their whole part in the movie is that they're like rushing to get this garden catalog out, and they're super stressed about it. So it's not so much that they don't care about Coraline, they just like have this time crunch. And at the end of the movie when they finally come back after being released from the snow globe and like, okay, like we're gonna go out and celebrate tonight. So like, like it's gone well. Like they're getting like their money from the catalog. They can go buy real food now. And like it just like it feels like a pretty realistic kind of issue you'd have, especially if you're like an 11 to maybe 13-year-old girl and you just feel like super bored and your parents are busy, but like they're busy for real reasons. Like, and it's not gonna, obviously, they're not always that busy. It's just like because this catalog has to get out. So that was pretty realistic. And I think that was kind of a nice moral you don't see that often. Just like, even if people aren't perfect, maybe that's better because like you still know they genuinely care about you and things that seem perfect might not be or might be for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I definitely think that I found the parents' portrayal pretty realistic. And I don't think it's super valid to say any sort of like neglectful thing.
Yeah.
Although it does, like the first half of the film, it maybe comes something akin to that, like across, because we're seeing things so much through Coraline's perspective. But the
Mm-hmm.
thing that stood out to me was especially like the whole sequence when they're going shopping for her uniform and then they jump
Yeah.
back. She said she definitely seems
Such a
very
nice little
caring.
scene.
Yeah, like that definitely warmed me up to her mom character a lot more. Um, yeah, I think that yeah, there's a lot of realism with the parents' portrayal. Um, yeah, getting continuing with the Coraline's character, I guess let's bring in Dakota Fanning's voice performance with
Yeah.
her. I don't know. I feel like usually you can like tell it's Dakota Fanning, but I feel like she's like the most in disguise here. Like I think it's not obvious that it's her.
Yeah, it's not distracting at all. And I think she was about like 15 when she recorded, so she wasn't a ton older than Coraline was probably supposed to be, which might have helped.
Yeah,
And I really enjoy her like Midwestern accent because like
yeah,
whenever she
yeah.
says words like back, it's like very like and like that's just kind of a nice like because I guess she's originally Coraline was from Michigan and she moved to
Or
Oregon
yeah.
in the movie. So it would make sense that she'd have that kind
And
of
then yeah, and then when
drawl.
she's in the other world, and then like her friends speak in the picture, and she's
Oh
like
yeah.
a couple of trolls, and like yeah, so it's
Oh
like
yeah, that was so nerdy. That's really nice. Like Coraline's kind of a little nerdy and a little weird,
I
which is
yeah, I also
why,
feel like it's supposed to be
yeah.
like a stereotypical like Midwestern Michigan accent. It's pretty interesting seeing Dakota Fanning try that.
hmm
Yeah, I think they did great with this. I think it was like a really subtle performance. Like to me, this is one of those like where the voice just feels like inseparable from the character.
hmm
So it's like how do you even judge? Because it's just like okay, that is Coraline's voice. Like it just sounds so much like her. Dakota Fanning, another notable voice work performance for me was when she was the one of the leads in the dub of My Neighbor Totoro, and I think she was really great in that too. And she was even younger
Oh
in that,
yeah.
so yeah, definitely. I'm
hmm
seeing other voicing credits on her resume here. A lot of them went from when she was younger though, so yeah, definitely great work there. I mean, other I don't know other notable uh voice actors in the film. Terry Hatcher, I guess, was the other main
Yep,
performance,
for
right?
sure.
Who had like pretty differing roles with the two moms there. And then I think Chad Hodgman was good as the father. I liked Keith David as the cat. I
Oh,
recognize
he
his
did
voice
such a
now.
good job.
It's like, oh, that's Keith David. Just like that's how he talks. Yeah. So let's talk about the book for a little bit because you mentioned it
Oh
briefly when talking
yes.
about Coraline's character. So I've not read this. You've read this. I know that from reading the Wikipedia article, one of the notable things is that the YB character was not in the book. How does your
Mhm.
perception of Coraline change, like when reading the book and seeing the movie? Like, is her arc more defined in the book, or like how is it like just seeing like her? I assume it's like her internal monologue. A lot of the
Yeah, that's exactly why YB was brought in, I imagine, because they couldn't have her just like talking to herself or like internally monologuing the whole film, which is like a thing that happens a lot, I
yeah.
think,
So
with
how
book
how did her
adaptations.
monologue go in the book?
Well, just she I think the big difference between the Coraline in the book and the Coraline in the movies that the Coraline in the book was a bit more sensible from the get-go. Like cuz like the Coraline in the movie has to kind of be seduced over several visits to really like love this other mother and like think that she's great because she has the conversation with the cat where he's like why like you don't know all you think you know about like the other mother. She's like, what are you talking about? She's amazing. And I don't think the Coraline in the book would ever have said that. I think as soon as she realized that something was super off about that world and everything was just uncomfortable and the fact that everyone had like button eyes, she kind of wanted to get out of there. And at the end when she has to get rid of the key, she like kind of immediately knows something's wrong, and she like has this whole scene where she like gathers up all of her dolls and like a disposable tablecloth, and she like very loudly proclaims, she's like, okay, I'm like gonna go take this key and have a tea party, like la la la. And she like sets it up, so she puts like the tablecloth, and she sets like all the dolls around the well on top of the tablecloth like weights, and she sets the key like very carefully in the middle and waits for the hand to just like pounce on it, and then it like shoots down into the well, and it's kind of taken care of. And in the book, she's just kind of like, oh, gotta get rid of this key, and just like kind of walks around and doesn't like even know about the hand, and it almost like strangles her to death as it tries to like bring it back to the house. And Wybie's the one who kind of ends up saving her. So those were the two biggest differences, I think. Coraline was a little more intuitive and maybe had like slightly more like agency, but like I don't think like her agency is something that's really compromised at all for the majority of the film, and that's like one of the things I really appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, I had like brief thoughts like when she was doing her game at the end, her that she was like being
Mm-hmm.
given everything.
Yeah.
But then it was like pretty quickly rectified because like the climax she had to do like everything right. So I don't think that was a huge deal, right? Yeah. Um. Yeah. I was talking about the other mother for a little bit. I think I think that we should have mentioned like the scenes at the end with like at the very end with her trying to escape and like her continuous transformation of something like more horrific as
Mm-hmm.
like definitely one of the standout visuals from the film. And for yeah, for how do you? So I was kind of struck this viewing about how like quick everything is at the end. Like that, I think that was kind of interesting. So I guess it's like it's distinct enough to leave that much of an impression in such a short time. How did you think they handled just kind of the devolving of like the other mother into this thing and like her presence at the end of the film?
I mean, I think part of a lot of people, it seems to be that they felt like the pacing of the Coraline movie was always a little off, and they always thought that the majority of the film should have been like Coraline trying to find the lost souls of the dead children, whereas it's actually mostly like her like exploring the house in the beginning, and like going downtown with her mom to get her school uniform, and visiting the other mother a couple times. But the ending is a little quick. The scene with the house kind of unraveling into a spider web was completely a movie thing, and I think it's kind of like one of those parts that's like, okay, like I see why you're doing this, like so it feels like it it's like one more trial, final trial she has to get through before she like finally gets home. One thing I really appreciated was the fact that it was like so much like a spider web, and like the other mother during her transformation turns into like such a long, angular, spindly figure, and she has like 4 or 6 legs by the end of it. She really does look like a
Mm-hmm.
spider, and that is such an interesting, in terms of just like the whole fact that that opens up how the whole other world is kind of like this very meticulously crafted spider web made specifically to appeal to Coraline, to ensnare her, for the other mother, which is really interesting. And so in that case, like the fact that she looks so much like a spider makes a lot of sense. um and the other mother character is so, I don't, they call her a beldam, and it
Yeah.
took me a while to like, is that like a thing? Apparently that's just another name for witch. um and one line that always really struck me was when Coraline's walking with the cat, and she's trying to find the souls, and the cat says, because Coraline's like, what does she even want with me? And the cat says, well, she probably wants something to love or
Yeah.
something to eat.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell with her kind. And that was really, I'm like, something to love. Like, why would a witch want something to love? And I was thinking back, because, like, if the other world isn't that big, Coraline walks through the whole thing, and it's a really awesome sequence where the trees become less like trees, which is like one of those things in the book that I think they did really, really well visually in the film. Like you see the trees become more just like abstract shapes and finally dissolve into just like wires and everything. And so she walks around the whole world, and maybe part of the reason the beldam like has, because she's kind of all alone, you know, in a way. Like I know the Beldame's like she doesn't need a lot of sympathy. She's kind of a irredeemable character, but she's all alone in this world. She kind of exists in that's all fake, and her only real company are these puppets that are like semi sentient that she made herself. So I think maybe part of the issue is that she does want somebody else there, but she doesn't know like the right way to love. Like her love is so smothering and oppressive and all consuming that she kind of just like absorbs the children and leaves them as these like little husks of, you know, she takes their souls away. You know, there's like nothing of them left. And that scene where she puts Coraline in the mirror and you see like the remnants of the ghosts and they're so frail and just sad looking. It's just like kind of horrific to think that the Beldam could do that to them, but also it's really intriguing to think like, well, what's her intentionality? Was she literally just hungry, or did she just like really go about loving them the wrong way and ended up consuming them
Yeah,
completely?
I think it was not clear what
Mm-hmm.
what like the her intent, ultimate intent with Coraline was. I guess my impression is that she just wanted uh, some form of having her there and not like to kill her.
Companionship, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's really interesting. And I was definitely, when you're talking about that, I was definitely reminded of a book I recently read, Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, which is like completely not related except for maybe this concept of uh, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, um,
What is that?
in which a caregiver um, like creates abuse or problems with the person they're caring for so that they can like care for them more.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that used a lot. And you know, at the end when remember because when Coraline finally gets to the door after like the crazy spider web scene, like and the door is just like coming at her, you know. I thought that was really well done. And the other mother is like screaming at her and she's like, "Don't leave me, like I'll die." And she
Yeah.
seems like so I'm like, why is she so upset if she just like oh snap, like got my meal ran away. Like it seemed like so much more than that. And
Hmm.
that's when I started thinking like, what does it really mean to her to have somebody with her? Like, is it really that like terribly crushing to have someone leave? And maybe it is.
Yeah, I definitely see parallels between Adora and Sharp Objects and the other mother here. And yeah, I think that's like it's a much more interesting characterization to have her as some type of like misguided is a not strong word for for what it is, but
Yeah.
like some not correctly channeling like desire for companionship
Yeah,
or someone
very
to care
poor
for.
execution.
Yeah, it's
Even if well intentioned, possibly, even
yeah, right. I
though
think
she
it's I think it's
slays
much more
them.
interesting to think of her characters from like a potential motives we could understand perspective. And yeah, I think that potentially diagnosing her with Munchausen syndrome by proxy is pretty interesting. I don't know if that's what we're going for here, but it could be. You were also talking about the scene towards the end where it like devolves into the house like devolves into a spider web.
Yeah, super
Yeah,
interesting.
I really enjoyed that watching it this time. Super stylistic and like minimalistic. In terms of the way like it happens, and it definitely stands out as a super striking visual thing. Do you think it was like a net positive overall? Definitely a different. You said a difference from the book.
The spider web, see, it made sense because, like, in the book, Coraline, like, as soon as she gets the snow globe, she's like out of there. You know, she's
Hmm.
just like going through the door. In the movie, she just kind of stands there. But it makes sense in the sense that because, like, the other mother, one of the really interesting things about her world is like she clearly isn't like 100% all the time, and she can't maintain that level of facade forever. So when the house starts to crumble, and like the fact that her persona is changing, I don't think it's just that she doesn't care. I think she literally can't maintain like looking like Coraline's mom forever. And by the time Coraline's like, okay, well, if you're potentially gonna cheat, I'm gonna cheat you. She's like, all right, well, that's it. Like gloves off. And that's when like the floor collapses and the spider web thing happens. And in that sense, I think it makes a lot of sense, like why the other mother would choose to do that in that case.
Yeah, yeah. I think that character is definitely interesting, but I also feel like they're definitely much like everything in this film, pretty minimalistic with her
Mm-hmm.
characterization. Like I think you could definitely argue that like they could have done more with her, and it was pretty like thin what they did do, and I feel like that applies to like every plot element, which I think is kind of the point.
Yeah,
So
because you're saying this is a movie that is more like an experience
yeah,
than like particularly like really gung ho about character arcs. And they're there, but I think they're definitely in the background and it's more just about experiencing the world. So
yeah.
that's okay.
I like if I was gonna criticize elements, I could just list them off here, and I guess I will. But they're like I don't think any of these are important. I think
Hmm. Yeah.
I think Coraline is characterized a little thin. I think the other mother is characterized thin. I think that I think that the pacing is off at the end, right? I think that the there's not enough explained about the mythology of the film, and it's supposed to be fairy tale like, but I also think that there's a lot of elements that seem nonsensical if you start to think about them too much. Like even just the cat makes no sense. It's just everything like mythological wise is probably not there. I think that the well is shoehorned into the beginning, and then it's like, oh, we're going back to the well, and it doesn't seem like there's any sort of reason why we should, other than that it was at the beginning of the film. I think
The
that stood
well,
out to me this time a little bit. So
I think the well was definitely better incorporated into the book. But that's just like because like they just be like it was one of those things like if you're a kid and like you're in a property where there's like this potential danger, people just warn like don't go around there, like there's a well, you could like fall and die, it's really deep. And it was always kind of this like looming thing in the background, but it was never like quite as obviously, yeah, shoehorned in like it was in the film,
yeah, I mean, yeah, these
which
are
is just one of those things that I don't think translated super well.
yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's definitely not one of the stronger elements. And again, these are all film criticisms, of course. And yeah, I think all of those are their movies are like major problems. But in this movie, I like really didn't care that I didn't know anything about the mythology. I mean,
Yeah, I didn't
oh,
either really.
another thing is that like I think it's a little bit silly that everyone in the other world seems to like not want to cooperate with the other mother, and we never get any details on that. And yeah, I don't know. It's just I think once I started to think about that for anything more than like 2 seconds, it stood out as like I should have known more about that. But
I always assumed that was because they were like at least semi-sentient, like they were kind of their own people, whereas
they seem
they
sentient.
could
Yeah.
they would have like a feeling about something, and that's why they wouldn't want to hurt Coraline. But at the same time, like she has enough control over them that they kind of have to.
Why are they there? Why like
Where are they? Well, they're there for Coraline because everything's made to appeal to her, and the way the other mother decided to do that was to make.
so you think those are functions of the other mother's creation? Like she created them.
Oh, absolutely,
Interesting.
yeah. In the other world, because they all have buttons, so they're definitely her dolls.
See, I think that I feel
Um,
like that's extrapolating from what we were given in the film. Like I like that explanation. I just didn't know if the film was presenting that.
because there's that whole plot about like the doll. She finds the little doll that YB's
Mhm.
mother has had for like a long time, um, being like the spy that the other mother made so she could like look at the children and see what's wrong in their life.
Yeah.
And then she would take that to make this better, like seemingly perfect version in her world as like the ultimate trap to get them to want to stay with her. And they, I mean, as creepy as people say the film is, the book's definitely creepier. And I remember because the garden was never a part of the book, but it looks great in the movie. And that's the first section where she's looking for the souls and she has to go to the garden and they're all attacking her because of her seeing like stone she has in her pocket that the actress is downstairs like made out of like taffy or something. And the other father's there on his like mechanical thing, and it's like kind of like forcing her to attack him. He's saying like, "I don't want to hurt you," but like the other mother like is making me. What happens in the book is that she has to go down to like the cellar, and the other father's there, and he's just like this massive like slug thing. And the conversation he has with her is just like so uncomfortable, and he's basically like I don't want to hurt you, but I will because she wants me to, and like the longer you're down here, the more chance there is that I'm gonna hurt. And she has to like get it away from him, the trinket that has the soul of the first child in it, and like she at one point she like rips out his eyes so he can't like he has to like listen for her, which they kind of did actually at the end of the movie with the other mother. climbing up like the spider web, and you can just like you just get this feeling that just like as reluctant as like this puppet guy is to hurt her, he like absolutely will kill her if she's not like 100% like all the time while she's down there, and gets out as soon as possible. And it
Mhm.
was just this very very uncomfortable creepy moment, um which I don't think was quite replicated as much in the movie, which like probably for good reason. I also know that the film was first gonna come out as live action, and then they changed their minds like really quickly. Like this movie's gonna be way too scary for everyone if it's live action, so we're gonna do animation. Which I thought was always really funny because like I couldn't imagine like a PG version of this live action and still be like pretty truthful to the book, because it's pretty creepy. It's pretty
Yeah,
creepy.
I don't think they could replicate the specific tone. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's interesting that I feel like this is the only way I could ever envision the story being made film wise, and like it also coincides with like his first feature film,
Yeah.
and it just and like and also Henry Selick directing it. Like I feel like this is like the only way that Coraline is a thing is like these specific conditions. Like I feel like this is a stop motion story. I don't know. Do you it's I know nothing's like made. There's other things that have fallen into this category. Like we covered the movie Anomalisa earlier in the year, which was a play first, but when you see it as a stop motion film, it's like this obviously was going to be a stop
Yeah.
motion film if it's going to be anything. So, um, do you agree with that assessment that could you see this as anything other than a stop motion film?
I mean, I think, I mean, I guess I could, but I don't think it would turn out very well. Because the thing about the stop motion, I really like even like say like claymation, even though Coraline's not really claymation, they used wires. Is that you kind of have to like literally build the world, like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why things like it does so well. Like they're not like we're gonna just CGI everything. Like who even cares? They build like these huge sets, and then place like these tiny characters in it and rig up a camera and then like get like 3 to 4 seconds of animation out like every day for like 2 to 3 years, and it's just like so much commitment, but it pays off because it looks so good. And like what better way to bring a world to life than to have like this interactive space for your characters to live in, you know? Like you never feel like it's like really fake, you know, in the movie. And that was something I appreciated in the Curse of the Were Rabbit movie too. I
Yeah,
don't know if you've seen that, but like
yeah,
again, like they use all these like big sets, and it makes the world so believable, and so real and lifelike. And that I think that'd be really hard to do in live action, just because you know the it's such a kind of dreamy, fantastical story. You'd really have to commit, and the budget would probably be stupendously bigger to get the same effect that you could in stop motion. So
yeah.
it probably is like the perfect medium for this kind of story.
Yeah, and where we're up at somewhat similar in a lot of aspects to this. Let's talk about Henry Selick briefly, who directed Nightmare Before
Yes.
Christmas and James and the Giant Peach before this. Yeah, and I was reading a little bit about how like he was talking to Neil Gaiman like right after he wrote the book or before that. Yeah, to
Yeah,
tell us about that.
he's so because I always knew that like I'd been working on this film like forever, and I wasn't sure quite how long. Apparently, Neil Gaiman gave an interview a while ago, and he said that Henry Selick had been his first choice while he was writing for an adaptation. So he had him in mind. And Selick had actually read the story like 18 months before the book illustrator for the original book even started working on the illustrations. So that puts like the entire concept from start to finish for Selick around like 10 years, you know, because the film came out in 2009, the book came out in 2002. So if Selick had been looking at it for like 18 months prior to it being released, like yeah, that's a really, really long time to be working on one project. Even though obviously they weren't in production the whole time, but even if he was just like writing the adaptation screenplay for like 4 or 5 years, that's really, really a lot of commitment. And I
Yeah,
think that definitely shows because even though we've like pointed out all these things that don't quite translate, I think the best for the film, like there's so much that does. The vast majority is so similar, and that does take a lot of dedication, because you see a lot of adaptations that just like you're like, did the director even like read the book? Like, what is this? Like it's completely different, and sometimes that can be really good. But I think in this case, like that dedication was really, really solidly done, and clearly he had a lot of respect and appreciation for the story.
Yeah, yeah. Do you what any notable aspects of his direction? I think it's maybe hard to see. This is I feel like stop motion films more than a lot of things are like such giant works with so many people involved, right? Anything stand out with Henry Selick's influence specifically?
Well, I mean, I remember that scene at the very beginning when like the doll like floats in and that scene's so creepy. It's so great. It's like this is what the tone of the movie's gonna be. It's gonna
Yeah,
be creepy, but also kind of charming and whimsical and just and that scene where she's the other mother's hands are like prying open the buttons from the eyes, and she like cuts open the mouth and she pulls out the stuffing, and you just have this like husk of a doll. That reminded me a lot of Nightmare Before Elm Street, like the kind of the I don't remember the name of the character, Jack Skellington's like kind of love interest, who's like a lady who's like sewn together. It looked a lot like her, and I think in that case, I was kind of like, okay, like so this is definitely the same guy.
yeah, yeah. I don't have as much experience with his films, but definitely seems stylistically towards like Nightmare Before Christmas. Really seems in line with that. Let's go through uh more. Let's go rapid fire through some characters we even talked about
Okay.
to make sure we hit on a lot of stuff. We mentioned YB and how he's like a movie specific character. You said you were like more sympathetic to YB this time around. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, I think at first it's kind of like, who is this character? Like, why is he in the movie? He's not in the book. Like, what does he serve except like comic relief? And the second time around, I had a lot more sympathy because it's like I can't quite like I don't think his grandma's like not a good grandma, but she definitely like he's always like a little afraid of her, when she calls him. And he's kept away from the house. And that's one of the things I think the movie was really conscious about expanding on, because they're like, oh well, if kids keep disappearing in this house, like why is nobody like doing anything about it? This is a recurring problem. And in the movie, like YB's grandmother is like the landlady at the property, and YB has that line where he's like, well, I'm surprised that my grandma let you move in here. She usually doesn't rent to people with kids, which seems to imply that she like knew it was a problem. And you
Yeah.
find out later that her lost sister had disappeared under similar circumstances, so she has like a real reason for trying to keep
Do we ever get
kids from
resolution
living
as to
there.
why she let Coraline like in that house?
No, we don't.
Yeah.
It's kind of because they include that line, but then it's like, but she did. So guess maybe it's because like Coraline was the first she'd let in since she like owned it, and it'd been like enough time had passed, so she's like, okay, well maybe nothing weird will happen this time. But yeah, you don't get any like real reason
She also
why.
had the Coraline doll too. Like I feel like she could have
Yeah,
she
that's
could have
so
pieced
you
it
think
together and be like, this is not good.
I was wondering because like if Wybie had seen that doll for years, like the minute he saw Coraline, wouldn't he be like super weirded out?
Yeah.
Like why do you look like But he's just like, oh, weird coincidence, found the doll in the attic, like here you go. Yeah, that's one of those things that's a little confusing in the movie, but I can see they were well intentioned, and so
There's a
I'm
lot
not.
of plot holes like that. Let's add
Mhm.
that to my list of complaints. What about John Hodgman as the father?
I like
Not as much to do as the mother figure,
he
right?
doesn't. He has even less in the book though, so at least they made him kind of like a musician-y type.
Oh
Well, the other father is, and he's like a writer. I love seeing his like archaic old computer, because that reminded me a lot of like my parents' computers when I was a kid. And like when she turns out the power and he just like loses everything, it's like, oh man, it's too real. Because
another
I'm
yeah.
assuming, yeah, it takes place in the early 2000s, so that would make sense that that's the kind of technology that, and like flip phones. So, but I like the father because like, and the mom, like, yeah, she's busy. The father's busy too, but like he has that really adorable kind of like song he sings her, that like when they're having dinner, that she repeats later at the end of the film. And he has that cute moment with her when they're when the mom drops him off at the office before she and Coraline go shopping, and he like kind of like gives her a noogie, and she's like, dad, like I'm not a kid anymore, like gosh.
Yeah.
I'm such like a like yeah, like what kid like wouldn't feel that way if their dad was like playing around with them when they're like 11 years old.
Yeah, another big visual standout scene to me was like the other father, the piano plays me.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, and because I was looking at him like, why does this look so interesting? Because when he's playing, like, you go around the room, and so I'm guessing they stuck a camera on like a revolving platform that they had him playing the piano on, and then just like shot every frame from that perspective. But it gives a really nice sense of like 3D and of the space because you see the whole room just from where that camera is, and that was really well done. The hands are so because like it's one of those things like a lot of the movie things like where it's like kind of funny and like curious at the beginning and then just becomes like really uncomfortable at the end when it's like literally forcing him to attack her and like controlling
yeah,
him like a
yeah.
puppet.
That's that. Yeah, I think that's one of the ones I think of most looking back on the film. Oh, by the way, are we shipping Coraline and Wybie? Line,
The
Corby, Corby?
Why Courtney? See, we don't. This movie, like, I don't even think there are ship names for like
Uh,
ships in this movie. Maybe
there's no tag on
internet's a big
Tumblr,
place.
Corby.
Oh my God, Corby.
Are
I
we
guess that would be the
are you
ship
shipping
name.
it?
Absolutely not. I mean,
What do you mean
they're
absolutely not?
because Coraline's not very nice to Wybie. Like, she's always like punching him, and like he is like kind of weird. But like again, like his grandma like doesn't let him around the Pink Palace where all the residents are, and like there haven't been any kids there till Coraline, so like he hasn't had a lot of people like around him. I feel, and he's pretty isolated. So I think that might account for a lot of his kind of quirkiness. And Coraline's a little weird too. So like whenever she kind of like gets mad at him for being like creepy, it's like, well, Coraline, like you're not the most normal, like, and that's great about her, but it's like you're kind of being a hypocrite. And like just that whole part when you see the other YB and he can't talk and the other mother's like, I thought you'd like him better if he didn't talk, so I fixed him. And
Yeah,
it's like that's so
yeah,
creepy, like, and at the end when the other YB's even feeling bad, so she like clips his lips into this like grotesque smile because she thinks that's what Coraline wants. It's so messed up. I just feel so bad for Webby because of that. Because he's not a bad kid at all. His entrance was really interesting. I think, like, because the movie definitely took this shift from being kind of dreamy when she first walks into the forest to like when you see him on the bike on the hill and it's all dark and the wind is blowing and he has this like skeleton mask on and he just like rides there. I'm like, who is this? And then it's just like this awkward kid.
yeah. Hashtag Corby.
Do you ship it? This is what it's starting to
I
sound like
ship
to me.
nothing. What about Mr. Bobinski? Definitely for me, like visually is the big
Yeah.
part about him.
I love how these characters look. And I think some people have criticized Mr. Babinski and Coraline's father as looking particularly hideous, but I mean, if you're doing
It's
animation,
like
why
the
not
point.
make memorable looking characters that like no one looks the same. Although I think Coraline definitely looks a lot like her mom. They're definitely distinct enough that they're not just like carbon copies of each other, which sometimes happens in like Disney movies, unfortunately. But Mr. Roginski is really cool. Like, I guess he's like Russian. Like the accent sounds kind of
One would
Russian.
assume
Yeah, I
Polish.
have
Yeah.
no idea why he's the only one who's like blue. Everyone else is pretty normal skin
Oh
tones,
yeah,
and
yeah. You're
he's
right.
he's
He's
just
just
like
blue. Yeah,
blue.
that's unrealistic. Yeah.
And I really liked when Coraline's when she sees the mass circus in the other world. Just that whole sequence was so
Yeah, that scene
gorgeous.
was really
And
good.
like it's again, that's one of the ones you're just like, how did they choreograph jumping stop motion mice when there are like 50 of them?
Yeah.
Like, it's just it blows your mind. And it still holds up. It's one of those things like it's so well done that like it doesn't look any worse now than it did in 2009. It just looks really, really good.
I think this film overall visually holds up very well. I mean, it's
Yeah,
only been 6 years, but yeah,
true.
I think this movie could come out now, and I wouldn't question it. Um, the cat. I already talked about how the cat makes no sense.
Well,
I
he
like
makes
that character.
he the thing about the cat I think is he's like the biggest because there have been a lot of comparisons between Coraline being a lot like Alice in Wonderland, and I think
Yeah.
all the scenes with Coraline and the cat are a lot like the scenes with Alice and the Cheshire Cat and the kind of way he talks, where he's not quite answering your question, he's being a little aloof and mysterious. But I really liked that, and I don't know. I always like it when if people write about cats and they always make them very kind of like full of themselves, where they think they're like better than humans and that they're like so much wiser and smarter, you know?
Yeah.
And he does help her. I mean, I think those are one of the relationships where like they start off pretty opposed. Like when she first meets Wybie and the cat, she calls the cat a wuss puss, and by the end, he's helping her escape and he's giving her all these clues about how to defeat the Beldam, since the Beldam doesn't like him, since he can kill her rat spies and he can somehow like go between worlds. The worlds thing I think kind of confused me more this time around. I never really thought about it as much, but I do think it's one of those things. It's like when you really think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I did like that he was basically the same, but could talk to Coraline in the other world. It just
Yeah.
like makes the other world one of those places where it's like, well, what are the rules? You don't quite know, but clearly like they're different, and that's kind of a nice idea to play with.
Yeah. I don't think the world's thing makes sense, but
But I don't think it
but
needs
it
to
does.
at the
Yeah,
same
I
time.
don't care.
Yeah.
Right. I like the cat. I think if you think anything about the character more than surface level, he doesn't make any sense, but it's okay. Let's close it out with the I don't know if they're sisters, but the
Oh no, they're
the
not.
the
Miss Spink
friends.
and Forcible.
Yeah, Spink and Forcible. I feel like these are the weirdest characters, kind of. That the scene in the other world when
Oh
she's in
man.
like Forcible
Pasties. Yeah,
is in
that
that
oh my
that
god.
bikini question mark, right? Yeah, and then
So funny.
that was really weird.
A lot of people, especially people that are over the age of like 25, seem like kind of offended that Miss Forcible was like in pasties and mostly like naked. But like honestly, I just like obviously like Laika has never been like the most like they're not afraid to push boundaries, I guess, like which is why I think they do creepy so well, because they're willing to push it a little farther than I think we're used to like thinking kids can handle, or that like is safe for children. Which is part of what makes it like so appealing to people of all ages. It's not like a kid film, it's like a family film, and I think the rules for that are a bit different. And Mystique and Miss Forcible, so one thing I found out, so the movie takes place in Oregon, and the town takes place and has like a very well-known Shakespeare festival, which is why when Coraline and the mom go downtown and you have like those kids that are like quoting Hamlet, it's not completely out of the place. Laika is also, I think the studio's based in Oregon, so they had like kind of a personal connection to that kind of history with the town, the fact that the Shakespeare Festival was such a big thing in Oregon, which is kind of just like a nice tidbit for people who live there, I'm sure, to have like places that they actually know seen in the movie. But so that's interesting because like both Miss Speak and Forcible were old actresses, and Neil Gaiman confirmed, I don't know, a couple of years ago on like Twitter that they are actually a couple. And it's one of those things that
Really?
like it doesn't add anything to the movie, but when you're like, oh, well, that's why they've been like together for like 20 plus years. Like, it's not just like living of convenience. They're like actually together. That's interesting.
Okay, that makes me like that. Like, those characters I feel like are pretty unsubstantial, but when you add that in, I feel like it's like much better.
Oh well, now that you said, yeah, I mean I don't quite, because like they're kind of competitive, like they're always like when they're like reading Coraline's tea leaves, Miss Fink is like, oh, it's danger,
Yeah,
and Miss Forcible's
they
like,
do that thing
no,
like twice.
it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, and like when they're singing in that crazy other world sequence,
it evolves
they're
into
like
that too. Yeah.
interrupting each other,
Mhm.
yeah, but that was really cool. And again, like when they're doing the flips in the air, like on the trapeze, and they like grab Coraline and flip her through the air. Like, I don't remember what it felt like seeing that on the big screen, but I imagine it was really, really stunning.
Mm.
And just like again, like if you're gonna make a movie, like make it a movie, like make it as cinematic and interesting, and take advantage of that 3D space as much as you can. And maybe the fact that like produced this in 3D made them more conscious of all those like camera angles and stuff. But for whatever reason, it definitely helped, and it made it way more interesting than just like character looks to the side and everything's super flat. Like that's one of the things that always bothered me about like Family Guy episodes because they're so flat. There's no substance, you know. Like it's like, why is this even animation? Like they don't move that much. Like their backgrounds aren't very interesting. Like it's so, you know.
Okay, second podcast in a row talking about Family Guy, so that's interesting.
Oh really?
Yeah. Um, let's close this one out by discussing it in classic Dylan fashion, discussing the 2009 Best Animated Feature Oscar race, which was
It
here.
was a crazy year.
Let me
So many good films.
Yeah, let me give you the nominees. We had Up, Coraline, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Princess and the Frog, and Secret of the Kells. I would contend that this is by far the strongest category in the Best Animated Feature race. It only started in 2001, but like I think like second places are 2015, the year we just had. But I've seen all 5 of these films. How many have you seen of the ones mentioned?
I think I've seen all of them.
All of them, yeah. I think all of those are like great films. Like that's crazy. Um, I would say I feel like for me, Fantastic Mr. Fox is like number 5. I don't know.
I'm not a big Wes Anderson fan at all, so
I'm a Wes
it's not
Anderson fan,
crazy.
but I think that movie was not as strong as these other ones. I think it was still very good. And then like I feel like Princess and the Frog is maybe number 4.
Yeah.
I really liked that one, but I feel like compared to Up, Coraline, and Secret of the Kells, and then like between those 3, those are 3 incredible films. What do you
Yeah,
favor between those 3?
Secret of Kells is so it's I think like Coraline, it's one of those movies that's so much its own thing. It kind of defies your normal expectation of like plot
Yeah, to
structure
me, Secret of the
and
Kells
sequence of
is very
events.
similar to Coraline. They're both very experiential and
Mhm.
plot light films.
And for that reason, it's hard to say one's better than the other because they're very much their own thing. But I do think both of them are like super top quality movies. So if either of them had won, I would have been just as
And
happy.
then Up won, and like Up is such a weird film too. It's like has,
Yeah, Up is kind of
and
weird.
like like the best 10-minute opening in like film history,
That's the
and
thing, though. The opening's so good, and the rest is kind of like cannot live up to that.
I also
So,
think the rest is like also
uh,
very good. But yeah,
hmm.
I think I think I probably favor Secret of the Kells over in these 3, but like all 3 of these are like top notch films.
Yeah, that was a good year.
Yeah, so it's just I don't know. I feel like in another year, Coraline definitely wins this category. Like in 2011, 2012,
And
um,
Pixar had like, a real winning streak,
it did.
especially
Yeah,
at that point.
I think
So,
any year between 2011 and 2014, I think Coraline would have won. Maybe even over Frozen. Not sure. Uh,
I don't know.
I mean, I think Coraline's a better film than Frozen.
Yeah, but
I actually
it's
really
got more
like Frozen.
masterful.
Like, I think that's. I'm not saying that like lightly. Like, I think Frozen's like
Mhm.
genuinely a good film, and I also think Coraline's genuinely a good film. But yeah, maybe there's too much hype surrounding Frozen, right? Uh, so I don't know. I think that was really interesting looking at the 2009 race. Like those, that's some great films. And I want to talk about like every other one of those films at some point on this podcast,
Oh,
especially Secret of
absolutely.
the Kells. Like,
Yes. And Song of the Sea, I have not
I
seen,
have
but
not seen Song of the Sea.
I'm very
And I want to
hopeful
see
that
that
it's just as good.
because the Secret of the Kells is so good. Okay, any final thoughts on Coraline to close us out here?
Final thing I think would be because I was trying to pay a lot more attention to how the film looked this time around, and one thing I think I really appreciated was that because the real world, and this is kind of like a personification of like Coraline's super bored because her parents are so busy, um like lots of gray tones, it's very like misty and kind of serene, but the music is so nice, and this is one thing we haven't talked about. The soundtrack is actually like I think
Yeah,
phenomenal
I
in this
agree.
movie. It's so captivating, and it's the most kind of dreamlike and like upbeat in the real world, and it's like kind of more subtly kind of mystifying and a little sinister in the other world, which is really interesting because in the other world the colors are like so like big, and it's so bright, and like the pink palace just looks so incredible in the other world compared to the real world, even to a point where I think like its pinkness makes it somehow like more 3D than the gray tones in the real world, because it makes it like kind of flat looking in comparison. And when we first see Coraline, she immediately stands out, because she's in all like primary colors and against like this very like gray and white background. So like we're immediately drawn to how she looks and the fact that she is the main character. Even like because her parents are also in like her mom's usually wearing like a white turtleneck, and she has like these bags under her eyes, and her dad's like in various gray and green tones, so she really is the standout looking character in that like very bleak looking world. But the fact that the soundtrack is so peppy kind of contrast, because like that's I think one of those hints that like even if like the real world seems boring, like this is where like the life is, and the vibrancy, even if it's like something Coraline hasn't been able to realize yet for herself. The music's so good.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely,
Yeah.
we should have mentioned that earlier. The music definitely great. Yeah, other things. That was the other a lot of topics there. We could go into more detail, but we have to close it out here. Um, yeah, overall, yeah, I think Coraline, if you haven't watched in a while, definitely worth revisiting. And I think this is, I feel like Coraline is going to stand out looking back on like the cream of the crop from this kind of time period in terms of
Mm-hmm.
animated films. Like I think it's like definitely distinct, and that's also why it's like functions as kind of maybe even a great film. I think I'd characterize it as a great film.
I
So,
think I look at the film as being like not so much an adaptation of the book as like kind of its own thing. Um, because it is like because it was in development for so long, and like if Selleck had been making us like starting a screenplay while like it was the book was still being published, like I do think that gives it kind of a right as its own like entity in a way. Because if those two things were going on kind of simultaneously, it makes sense that having this be less of an adaptation and more of just like transforming the work into something completely new while also like tying very closely to the main concepts and character arcs, I think is something I might argue for in terms of looking at the film.
nice. Yeah, I think it's worth treating any of these kind of adaptations as their own thing for in terms of critical lens. And some are more unique than others, and I think this would be one of them for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So let us know what you thought of any of our discussion here. Leave comments on YouTube, on overlyanimated.com in the comments section, or send us Tumblr asks. I'm Dylan Hysen. That's Michelle Anderer. You can find all of our social media links and everything about this podcast at overlyanimated.com. This ad-free podcast is brought to you by our patrons. You can support us at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our patrons, Shayna, Mitch, Cordell, Beatrice, Nate, Andy, Jamie, Rachel, John, Ryan, and Catherine, aka Hannah, Fever Mitch, Cordell University, Beatrix Strange, Nathan Fillion, Buzz Lightyear, Mailman, Rachel Rose, Johnny Bravo, Brian, and Cookie Cat. Looks like we're going to get into the other two Laika films at some point on the podcast.
Yes.
Watching Coraline made me want to watch them even more for some reason.
You will love Paranorman if you love Coraline. I can definitely guarantee that.
Okay, yeah,
It's absolutely it's a great film.
I assume
It's
I
so
will like
good.
both of them. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think I was looking at them briefly. The Box Trolls cast looked great too. So definitely, we'll be getting into those films as well and overly animated, and let us know if there's other animated films you want us to cover. Hopefully, we'll get into everything at some point. And yeah,
Everyone who hasn't read Coraline, please do. It's a quick read. It's absolutely solid book. It's one of my favorite Neil Gaiman books, and I think it definitely holds up too as a classic book.
I Neil Gaiman's American Gods is getting adapted now too.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
heard the Graveyard book might also.
There's like Sandman was also
Yeah, the graphic.
I think
novel.
American Gods is coming first though, so to TV, so that's gonna be interesting. I really like that book. Yeah, okay. That's it for this week's podcast. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.